I will very quickly repeat our thanks that we already mentioned yesterday of the institutions that made this great event possible. And again, thanks to Birzeit University for hosting us today. Thanks to the Cultural Studies and Philosophy Department, the Department of Democracy and Human Rights, to the Khalil Sakakini Culture Center, the Goethe-Institut Ramallah, the Rosa Luxemburg office in Ramallah, and also my current affiliated university, the Leuphana University, and its program on cultures of critique, and their funding institution, the DFG, German Research Foundation. I would also like personally to thank those who have made this event possible, namely Yazan, Khalili and Lara Khaldi, Mona Kriegler and Lena Kund, Ute Beug, Sari Harb, Charlotte Sass, Rami Sarami, Ala Zeh, and Muda Cassis. Thanks a lot for coming. I also have prepared a paper, and to the translators, I gotta apologize. It's not really the paper I sent a couple of days ago. It's always last minute work, so it's a variation of what I sent earlier. First of all, I changed the title. Is it okay with that distance? Yeah, okay. I called it originally The Time of Capital and or The Revolution of Time. It was a very optimistic title because there was no time to write the part on the revolution of time. So we are stuck with the time of capital. In 1978, the Italian philosopher Giorgio Agamben wrote, "The original task of a genuine revolution is never merely to change the world, but also and above all to change time." In 1858, in the Grundrisse, one of the preparatory texts preceding Capital, Volume 1, Marx stated that it is, quote, "the economy of time to which all economy ultimately reduces itself." Following these insights, my paper starts from the assumption that any radical change in the mode of production must also affect the constitution of time. Capitalism is not merely a historical epoch, but also a specific regime of time as social relation. Capital, as Marx claimed, quote, "is not a thing, but rather a definite social relation of production belonging to a definite historical formation of society, which is presented by a thing, and lends this thing a specific social character." This thing, of course, is the commodity. Even capitalism, the commodity is the bearer, or to be more technical, the objective shell of specific social relations. We can trace the social constitution of time, that is, time as social relation, back to the commodity form. Marx's interest in the constitutive link of time and political economy reaches back to his earlier studies, even prior to the project of the critique of political economy. In the essay The Poverty of Philosophy from 1847, he writes, it's also a quote, "Time is everything, man is nothing. He is, at the most, time's carcass. Quality no longer matters, quantity alone decides everything, hour for hour, day for day." End of quote. In capitalism, time appears as an alienating, negative principle, systematically subordinating the human being under its laws. As a result of industrial capitalism, humans as laborers are abstracted from their generic faculties and reduced to mere bearers of labor power, disciplined by and subordinated to the time-stamped clock. Of course, the classic image that we have in mind is modern times Charlie Chaplin. As the proverb has it, time is money. For it is labor only that produces economic value. As Marx put it in Capital, how then is the magnitude of this value to be measured? Plainly by the quantity of the value-creating substance, the labor contained in the article. The quantity of labor, however, is measured by its duration, and labor time, in its turn, finds its standard in weeks, days, and hours. End of quote. By labor, Marx does not mean any labor, but labor as value-creating substance, which he also defines as abstract human labor, or labor as such, Jamil mentioned already, in opposition to concrete labor. Value is formed and performed by abstract labor, which is itself defined by another relation, a relation of time. Abstract labor, however, cannot be measured by chronometric time, as Marx reminds us. Quote, "The time spent in production counts only insofar as it is socially necessary for the production of a use value." End of quote. The measure of socially necessary labor time is not external, but internal to the very relation it expresses. Socially necessary labor time is not an empirical amount of time, but time as an abstract social relation. In order to unravel this paradox, let us remind ourselves of Marx's starting point. Marx said, and we know this of course from Capital Volume 1, the commodity has a dual nature, use value and exchange value. Whereas the use value seems unproblematic, bound to a concrete, useful thing, the exchange value expresses an abstract social category, that is, value. As bearer of value, a thing exceeds its thingly, thingish character. It possesses a certain quality that turns it into the materialization of a social substance, value. The temporality of value is different from the one of use value. A thing as use value can be measured by its movement, spatial extensions, and temporal durability. As bearer of value, however, a thing entertains a relation, a social relation, a value relation, to other things, insofar as they are the results of the application of labor power. And we know labor power is the only commodity that can produce value. This abstraction from use value is redoubled on the level of labor relations. Concrete labor is measured by chronometric time, basically my watch, whereas abstract labor time expresses an abstract yet really existing social relation, which appears on the market as a money relation between exchanged commodities. In other words, commodity abstraction is a dialectical process combining two antithetical temporalities: the time of commodity circulation on the surface of the market and the time of the production process. This temporal dialectics is not static, but moving. It pertains to a phantasmagorical, intoxicated or speculative time, the time of capital. This time cannot be represented spatially, like vulgar concepts of time. From the perspective of the production process, the concept of socially necessary labor time is already an abstraction from the multitude and specificity of concrete labor times. When different labor times are equated as socially necessary labor time, the particular qualities of each labor and the labor process are abstracted. So Marx used the famous example of carpeting or being a shoemaker and so on. In this way, when exchanged as equal values, the products of the production process can circulate in real time without representing the concrete labor times that were equated in the production process in the first place. Thereby, the time of commodity circulation is never in tune with the time of its production process. And indeed, as Marx scholar Riccardo Bellofiore argues, quote, "Socially necessary labor time constituting value is not just a technical average, because the sociality of private laborers, and so the same magnitude to be measured, is eventually fixed in market exchange. Thus, socially necessary labor time is known only ex post, après coup." This intervention ex post curves the linear time of the production process, concrete labor, and introduces a dimension of logical time, that is, the anticipation of the time of the market and the retroactive determination of the value that was generated in the production process. So we already see the dialectics of time get a bit more complicated here. We have two times, or two temporal trajectories here. The temporal split between concrete labor time and its abstract average is further complicated on the categorical level of the commodity form. Although abstract labor, value, cannot be rendered in terms of quanta of concrete labor measured by the linear time of the production process, weeks, days, and hours, the commodity form is a necessary condition for the production of the chronometric standard that allows, in the first place, for quantifiable time units of concrete labor. Or to put it differently, the category of abstract labor already implies a social mode of time as measure, which is not merely a concept applied to a given mode of production, but the very production of this standard qua abstract labor time unit. In capitalism, time does not only function as measure, but also as a real abstract relation of the social. If it were just a measure, it could be just, then we could look at our watch and we could immediately know in which duration you have produced which value. In his reading of Marx's Capital, Alfred Sonretel coined the term real abstraction, we already heard it, characterizing an abstraction from use value actually performed by economic agents in the act of commodity exchange. Following Sonretel, the coin, the money sign, is the historical as well as logical origin not only of commodity exchange, but also of the philosophical Kantian transcendental subject, its pure concepts or categories and pure forms of intuition, namely time and space, structuring the logical as well as aesthetic forms of cognitive knowledge and experience. In this way, the coin is not just money in the instrumental, economic, vulgar sense, but as a mediator of exchange, but also the logical origin of everything the ancient Greeks considered as koinos, common or general. Money designates the ordinary token, commonly accepted sign of economic value, and at the same time the shared common structure by which the subject's cognitive faculties are structured. The capacity of spatio-temporal intuiting and the faculty of apprehending the manifold and determining its general features by means of intellectual abstraction. Following the Aristotelian terminology, Kant mentioned four categories: quantity, quality, relation, and modality. These categories underpin any logical judgment and provide the a priori framework for conceptual knowledge, which operates through conceptual abstraction. This a priori capacity to abstract, however, is not only intellectual, but shares its seemingly ahistorical logic with the historical practice of abstraction, operative in economic exchange relations, materialized and contained in the coin. In other words, real abstraction does not only refer to the prevalence of exchange value over use value, but produces the universalizing form of commodified exchange relations beyond, or rather before, the intentional preferences and choices of economic agents. Commodity exchange, the act of equating social labor by exchanging its products as commodities, performs a real abstraction, not an abstraction in mind, a real abstraction by doing, which remains unconscious, and yet this real abstraction is objective and real, and therefore not subjective or thought-induced. With Alfred Sonretel, we can claim that the Kantian a priori, or pure, forms of intuition and understanding have a history, a repressed history that remains unconscious and unrepresentable from the Kantian standpoint of transcendental, that means ahistorical forms. As Sonretel put it, time and space, rendered abstract under the impact of commodity exchange are marked by homogeneity, continuity, and emptiness of all natural and material content, visible or invisible. It's like air. So time and space as a priori forms of intuition are abstract in a specific sense. They function as empty ahistorical containers for empirical events. It is in this sense that they assume the status of timelessness and universality. and thereby repress their socio-historical origin rooted in the commodity form and real abstraction. Such formal abstractness of time and space is to be differentiated from empirical abstractness of concrete appearances in time and space, which are also dehistoricized under the impact of exchange abstraction. So I'm not talking about empirical phenomena like you feel alienated from the labor process or alienated by impersonal social relations and capital. Social relations are abstract as well, but this is an empirical form of experiencing abstraction in capitalism. Abstraction here is understood not as a symmetrical antonym to concreteness, but refers to an unconscious, intersubjective practice of dehistoricization. Every time we pay with money, this dehistoricization is at work. Only by repressing the history of a negative social relation, that is, class struggle and the exploitation of labor, the semblance of the universality and timelessness of commodity exchange can be maintained. So what then is abstract about abstraction? It is the enforced repression of negativity, the effacement of the uneven and discontinuous history of antagonistic struggles. This repression as social practice has real effects that pertain to both the formal disappearance of material traces in value, giving rise to the transcendental semblance of universal and timeless categories, remember Immanuel Kant, and the empirical liquidation, extraction and transformation of concrete labor as abstract labor, allowing for time and space to be treated and applied as abstract resources of capital accumulation. I'm almost done. Don't worry. In the real abstraction performed in commodity exchange, the formal abstract dimension, that is abstraction of time and space, and the empirical formal dimension, abstraction in time and space, intersect. And this intersection is only provided by the money form. In other words, abstract labor and the real abstract nature of time and space are codependent. Once money has assumed the specific capitalist money form. Capital time is insofar self-referential and cyclical as it requires money as its transcendental condition. I will stop in 5 lines. Even though money seems to be a sign, an abstraction from actual commodities, it functions as a real money commodity. And here I refer to Marx's famous image that he used in the first edition of Capital Volume 1 in 1867. It's not the one that is normally translated, which is the 4th edition. And here Marx writes, when he talks about the value formal dimension of money, it is as if among and besides lions, tigers, hares, rabbits, and all other real animals, which are as classified as groups, constitute the various genera, species, subspecies, families, and so on of the animal kingdom, there existed also the animal, the individual incarnation of the entire animal kingdom. End of quote. Within the sphere of value, thus, we are confronted with a fundamental paradox, an intertwinement of nominalism and realism. That is to say, money is both a transcendental concept for value, a general equivalent a priori, and the commodity actually produced within the production sphere. And of course, this paradox cannot be solved on the basis of linear chronometric time. If you want, the animal as such, really existing, is the dimension of capital time, the curved, condensed time of a time that you cannot measure in abstract, in linear, empty time like chronometric watch. Yet without this animal, as such, living among the others, lion, whatever, zebras, and so on, the others could not be measured in time. These are the 2 dimensions. Of course, now the second part has to start to unravel this, but we do this at another time. Thank you.